All authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age.
As we have often said, the home is the basic building block of any law-abiding, ongoing, productive society. And I might add that it is one of the greatest gifts that God has ever bestowed upon the human family. As the home, that basic building block, is a unit, and it provides, as it were, a classroom where every worthwhile principle can be exhibited. There is, of course, love. There is concern one for the other. Here is the environment in which mother and father can instruct young people as they mature and grow. Yes, one of the greatest gifts ever bestowed upon the human family, that basic unit, the family. You remembered, of course, how that originated. God created man of the dust of the earth, breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Genesis 2, verse 7. And God said in verse 18, relative to this man whom he has created, it is not good that the man should be alone. I'll make him a help meet for him, answering to his needs. Now, you know, when you stop to think about it, you wonder what a perfect man in a perfect world, with everything in it subject to him, might need. Oh, well, man is made in the image and the likeness of God. We've discussed that many times. Genesis 1, 26 and 27. Oh, God is love, 1 John chapter 4 at verse 8. So then man needed someone who could be the object of his love, someone for whose welfare he could provide, someone in whose embrace he could be complete, content, and quite happy. And God took a rib from Adam's side and made lovely Eve, gave her to be the wife of Adam. Adam then said, "This is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. Therefore she should be called woman, for she was taken out of man." And God said, "For this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother, shall cleave unto his wife. They two shall become one flesh, so that they are no more two, but one flesh." Through verse 24, Genesis chapter 2. Very interesting, isn't it? The creation of the home. I remember that Jesus, in speaking to those Pharisees who were trying him, seeking to make him stumble in his speech, they came to him in Matthew 19, you remember? And he said, among other things, beginning at verse 4, "Have you not read that he who made them from the beginning made them male and female? And said, For this cause shall a man leave his father and his mother, shall cleave unto his wife, and they two shall become one flesh, so that they are no more two, but one flesh. What therefore God hath joined together, let not man put asunder," through verse 6. So then marriage, ordained of God, is provided for the happiness, the fullness, and the well-being of man. Right. And did you notice what he said about that? What therefore God hath joined together. Marriage is of God. When that ceremony is said by one who possesses a license from the state to perform the ceremony, that's external, and that's necessary, but that's just a fundamental instruction that provides for this unity that God has provided. When you look one another in the eye, that question is asked, and you say, "I do." You're talking not just to one another, but to the Lord. You have made a vow. Marriage is a lifetime proposition. As we've often said, marriage is the blending together of two lives, two personalities of the opposite sex for so long as the two shall live in this world. It is the building of a home that respects the law of God and protects the morals of mankind. That's the home in a nutshell. Now, the homes in America today are in deep trouble. As a matter of fact, it has been suggested that almost half of the marriages contracted in this country end in the divorce courts. They are disrupted. And of course, if there are children, that leaves them at loose ends, emotionally disturbed, hardly knowing where to go, nothing to which to hold that is secure. And that's a tragedy beyond description. The home, marvelous indeed. What are the responsibilities of the home? I mean, why did God bring about this arrangement in the first place? Well, you remember in Genesis 1 at verse 27, and Jehovah God created man in his own image. Oh, in the image of God created he him, male and female created he them. Well, then in verse 28 he said to them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. So one of the basic purposes or design of marriage is the procreation of the human family. Oh, but even before that, there is the relationship between husband and wife. Yes. There is the contentment made available when the two become one, a basic unit that provides for their happiness, their well-being, as they share with the others, each loving other more than themselves. And that just makes Eden all over again, doesn't it? Sure, Adam and Eve sinned, and Eden was lost. They were separated from the tree of life. But in the sacred relationship of marriage, that same kind of happiness and fullness can be restored if indeed husband and wife recognize God's design for marriage. It is a lifetime proposition. Procreation of the human family? Oh, indeed. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth. You are aware that the home is the only means of legitimate birth. I think we understand that. Sure. As a matter of fact, I read not too long ago that about 46% of the children born in this great enlightened land of ours were born out of wedlock. That is a tragedy, as we said, beyond description. This indicates immorality and ungodliness and a lack of understanding of who we are, from whence we came, and what our responsibilities in this old world actually are. Friend, that is the result of fornication. Immorality in the extreme. As a matter of fact, to know God's thinking about illegitimacy in birth, all one needs to do is read Deuteronomy 23 at verse 2. Now, this principle is not true in the Christian age. The child born, even under sinful conditions, is as pure as the driven snow. It's innocent. He makes his life, hopefully with some love and instruction from parents, but born out of wedlock. That's not likely to occur, and that is one of the tragedies of sinful conduct. It is a terrible thing. But under the law, God said in Deuteronomy 23 verse 2, a bastard shall not enter into the assembly of Jehovah. Even unto the 10th generation shall none of his enter the assembly. Ooh, that is a tragedy indeed, but it is speaking of God's disdain for immorality and ungodliness that would bring an illegitimate child into the world. And as a matter of fact, in passing, that's probably the solution to David's statement in Psalms 51 at verse 5. He said, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Now, people read that today and say, oh yes, children are born in sin. When they come into this world, they are little friend. Jesus, of course, makes that quite clear that such is a false misunderstanding. Ooh, terrible, ungodly thought that a child would be guilty. No. Matthew 18, verse 3, except you repent and become as this little child, you shall in no wise enter the kingdom of heaven. The little child is pure, innocent, guiltless. Oh, he taught the same thing in Matthew 19 and verse 14. Suffer the little children, and forbid them not to come unto me, for to such belongeth the kingdom of heaven. So little children are pure, guiltless, and innocent. Well, then what did David mean in Psalm 51 at verse 5? I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. Oh, what did you say, Lord? Unto the 10th generation shall none of his enter into the assembly, Deuteronomy 23 at verse 2. Now, if you were to read Genesis chapter 38, you would find that Judah had an affair with his daughter-in-law Tamar. He did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. She deceived him. She disguised herself. But in consequence of that union, she had twins. The first was named Perez. So if you were to notice the genealogy of that Perez, and you can find this, by the way, set out in the last chapter of the book of Ruth, chapter 4, and the last 5 verses, verses 18 through 22. Perez goes right on down. The 10th generation is David. Perez, Hezron, Ram, Amminadab, Nahshon, yes, Salmon, Boaz, Obed, Jesse, David. The 10th generation. David was a man after God's own heart. So he was of the 10th generation. So what was his statement there in Psalm 51 verse 5? Oh, he said, I was shapen in iniquity. His father was still under the curse of Deuteronomy 23 verse 2. Oh, and in sin did my mother conceive me. He's not talking about himself, a baby. No, he's talking about his mother, talking about the circumstances that prevailed at the time of his conception. But he was of the 10th generation and known to be a man after God's own heart. It says, friends, only the home can give honorable birth. Terrible conditions prevail when men and women come together in that relationship without the sacred benefit of marriage. It is a shame and brings great tragedy to the human family. As a matter of fact, in 2 Samuel chapter 11, you remember that David, though a man after God's own heart, knowing better all the while, on the roof, saw a beautiful woman bathing. Should have turned around, gone back to his place, and minded his own business, but instead, being king, he sent for her, had a relationship with her. She conceived. David tried to cover it up. He had her husband Uriah the Hittite slain in battle. He sent a note to Joab, put Uriah in the forefront of the hottest fight and withdraw from him so that he dies. He murdered her husband. And you know, we've sometimes referred to the fact that the Bible is not written to satisfy human curiosity. No. The Bible supplies only the instruction that I need to stand in a right relationship with God. There are many things that we read in the Bible concerning which, simply to satisfy human curiosity, we would like to know. I wonder if this lady ever knew that David murdered her husband. He died in battle, or so it would seem to the observer. He was slain in combat, and that happens many, many times. And when the days of mourning were over, David took her unto himself, and she became his wife. That child that was born of that illicit relationship died. Great lesson to David. And of course, she conceived again and bore Solomon. And Solomon, one of the greatest kings ever to reign, and he was the wisest man between Adam and Christ. Marvelous indeed, but David had to make some drastic changes in the interim. You remember, the prophet came to him, and he told him a story. He said there were 2 men in one area, one very poor, the other very rich, had vast flocks and herds. The poor man had just one little ewe lamb. It was like a daughter to him. It was a pet. He loved that little ewe lamb. But the rich man had company to come, and he forbore to take of his own flocks and herds. And he went over, and by force he took the little ewe lamb from the poor man, slew it, and fed his guests. David's on his feet. David is a shepherd. Oh, this thing is terrible. David said, the man that did that is worthy to die, and he'll restore fourfold. I love Nathan the prophet. He looked him in the eye and he said, thou art the man. Now, David could have slain him in a second. There's no question. That's all right. He got the job done. He told him, put the blame, the sin right where it belongs. Thou art the man. But David is a good man. Oh, he recognized what he's known all along that's been on his conscience and bothered him, and he went to the temple of God and he prayed. And of course, God forgave him of the sin, but he told him, the sword will not depart from thy house. And all you need to do is read it from that point on. Oh yes, 2 Samuel chapter 11. David had problems until the day that he died. The sword shall not depart from thy house. Sin is a terrible, terrible thing. Only the home can give honorable, legitimate birth. On the basis of the home, marriage. Husband and wife who love one another. Wonderful indeed. But then when you think about the duties, the responsibilities of the home, we need to consider the preparation of the children, the offspring, for life in this old world. Now they need to understand the principles that govern life before the mechanics of operation. If the child knows from whence he came, who he is, upon whom he depends, if he understands that he is a spiritual being living in a physical world, there are rules that govern his thought, speech, and conduct. Then he'll know how to live in this old world. There's no question about that. So the first thing that needs to be done, the first duty that parents need to recognize, is to instill within the heart and the lives of their offspring the fact that they are spiritual beings. They depend upon God. Every blessing of life is from His hand, and we need to be grateful for that. So preparing that child for life in this old world simply means that he understands the principles that govern his conduct. That's set forth in the will of God. You know, parents have a wonderful privilege, or we might say, and in the light of the thinking of some, a tremendous responsibility. Not just bearing children and feeding them and clothing them and giving them shelter. No. That's all a part of it, of course. But the instruction of that child, that is so vital, so important. Then, of course, there is the education and the training of that child. This is the responsibility of the home. Mothers and fathers have this privilege, if you will. I remember the wise man made that statement, did he not? Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he's old, he'll not depart from it. Proverbs 22 at verse 6. Whose task, whose responsibility is this to train up that child in the way he should go? Friends, that is parental responsibility. Now, in our world today, and we should be thankful for it, we have many means and sources of assistance and help in that. Think of the Bible classes in the church, the periods of worship, when the love and the fellowship invigorates the thinking and the hearts of our young people. We make sure that they attend the services, that they think in terms of spiritual responsibilities. And that is a great source of encouragement and help in our spiritual development of our children. But at the same time, with regard to their secular education, we have public schools today. And that's wonderful. And if we aren't careful, we just somewhat sit back and expect the school to educate our children and to develop them. No. Parents have a responsibility. You need an association with that teacher. You need to know who she is, and you need to periodically, not to interfere with her work at all, but periodically to discuss with her, your child, is he or she where she should be? Are they developing as they should develop? Or is there a trouble with discipline? And if there is, you take care of it by all means. Yes, sir. Discipline is essential in the proper development of a child. No question. We need to understand there are principles that govern our conduct. There are laws by which we must abide. Yes. And that is taught by discipline. You correct him if he errs. And if you need to, let me know if he needs correction, and I'll do my best. And so we work in harmony with those areas of assistance that God has provided for the development of our children. But it is the responsibility of parents to develop their children. You know, the development of a child is fourfold, really, when you think about it. Luke chapter 2 at verse 52, we're told that Jesus advanced in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Yes, the fourfold development of a child. Now, one of the problems in our land today in the home is that parents have reduced that to just 3 steps rather than 4. Advanced in wisdom and stature and favor with man. That leaves out the most vital area of a child's development. Jesus advanced in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. How could he possibly do that? His parents were children of God. Now, they instructed him. Of course, he is the Son of God, and as he matures and develops, he knows all things. There's no question about the parent has a tremendous responsibility in the educational development of their children. Then, of course, with regard to the home and its responsibilities, there is the religious development of the family. Now, Dad, that's your task. Oh yes, you'll give account in the final analysis, and we need to understand that. We are spiritual beings, whether or not we recognize it. We are going to stand one day before God in the judgment, and we're going to give account of our conduct in this life. And one of the prime responsibilities of fatherhood is to be sure that our children have a knowledge of truth, and the best way to convey that knowledge is in a godly example. Yes, and you fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but nurture them in the chastening and the admonition of the Lord. Ephesians 6 and verse 4. That is the privilege of fathers, developing their children in the spiritual realm. We need to understand that. And dads, you have a responsibility toward the family. Yes. And then mom. I remember that Paul said in 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 14, I desire that the younger women marry, bear children, rule the household, give no occasion to the adversary for reviling. Did you notice what that said? The wife. Yes, sir. She's to rule the household. You see, that is her area of endeavor. She's with the children, and Dad earns the money, and he provides for the household, but her wisdom in buying, purchasing those things that are essential to the ongoing of the family, she uses thrift, and she does that quite well. It is a marvelous thing when you think about it. The two become one in marriage, but there's two people, husband and a wife, and they have responsibilities before the Lord. And then the development of their children, the religious growth of that family. You remember what Paul said about Timothy, do you not? What is that? 1 Timothy chapter 5, about verse 15. How that from a babe thou hast known the sacred writings, which are able to make thee wise unto salvation. Someone said, just a minute, how would Timothy from a babe have known the sacred writings, which were able to make him wise unto... the same book, 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5. Yes. Having heard of that unfeigned faith which is in thee, which dwelt first in thy grandmother Lois, and in thy mother Eunice, and I'm persuaded in thee also. Wait a minute. Timothy's father was a Greek, right? He probably not at all concerned with the spiritual matters. We're not told, but we assume that. But his grandmother Lois and his mother Eunice, they were faithful servants of God. What did they do for Timothy? They instructed him in the way of the Lord. That's what parents are for. That's what it is all about. No question about it. The religious development of the family, prime responsibility of dad. Mother plays a vital, indispensable role in that, no question. But the economy of the home, dad supplies, mom provides, we understand that. Then in the recreational activities of the home, be sure that you plan those recreational activities together. Be sure the children are a part of it. Sure, that's maybe light and you're not thinking, oh, but the greatest thing about that is the children are with their parents. They learn from their parents, even in simple things. It's not what they learn while they are on that vacation or the few days of just observation. No, it's the fact that they're with their parents. Wonderful, wonderful relationship indeed. You know, the home that is governed by the principle of love develops children that understand who they are, from whence they came, and where they're going. Teach your children about the love of God, faith in Jesus Christ.
The Gospel Broadcasting Network has brought you Preaching the Gospel with James Watkins. We make available free cassettes and CDs of our programs. If you would like a copy of today's program, please call us toll-free at 1-888-805-3390 and mention the lesson number you see on your screen. When you call, you may also enroll in our free Bible study course. Make a note of our phone number and give us a call, or mail your request to GBN Post Office Box 23604, Chattanooga, Tennessee 37422. Preaching the Gospel is a work of the Churches of Christ. Contributions of congregations and individual Christians make this broadcast possible. And now, back to my dad, James Watkins.
Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he's old, he'll not depart from it. So important. In what direction should a child go? Friends, he is a spiritual being made in the image and the likeness of God. He shall live forever. Jesus said, if you gain the whole world and lose your soul, friend, you've lost it all. This world will not endure, but you and I and your children will live forever. Teach them the Word of God. Faith comes from hearing, hearing with the Word of God. Oh, and it leads them, when they come to love the Lord and believe in Him, to turn from the willful practice of sin. That's repentance. And then they are ready to confess with their mouth what they believe in their heart. And when you have instructed them in the Lord's way, they are buried with Him in baptism. The old man of sin is done away. They no longer live therein. They are new creatures in Christ Jesus. Teach your children the fundamentals of the faith of Jesus Christ. Lead them by way of example. May God bless.
And to my